There are thousands of towers in the world. Some are famous because they are tall, some because they are beautiful. But there is one tower that is different. It is not the tallest. It is not the most decorated. It is famous because it is wrong. This is the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And when you look at it, your mind instantly fills with questions. Why is this tower leaning? Who built it like this? Wasn't it supposed to fall a long time ago? Was it designed to lean on purpose? Or is this the most successful architectural mistake in history? Picture it, the city of Pisa in Italy, a sunny square, a shining white marble tower. But it doesn't stand straight. It tilts, almost as if it is about to fall. Everyone who stands in front of it thinks the same thing. How is this still standing? And the questions don't stop there. If it leans this much, why didn't they demolish it? Why didn't they straighten it? Why did they keep such a risky building for centuries? How many earthquakes has it survived? How many storms has it endured? Weren't the people living around it ever afraid? And an even stranger question, if this was a construction mistake, how did it become a world wonder? If the tower could speak, imagine the tower talking. I was born in 1173. Layer after layer of marble was placed on me. And when my third floor was finished, the ground beneath me shifted. And slowly, I began to lean. But what did the builders think? Should we stop construction? Should we start again? Or should we just keep going like this? What decision did they make? Were they scared or bold? Was the money already spent? Or was it pride that stopped them from admitting failure? This tower became one of the most debated buildings in history. Were the architects geniuses? Or were they irresponsible? Was it truly a mistake? Or was it actually planned and we misunderstood history? Here is where the mystery begins. The soil under the tower was soft. Did they know? Did they ignore it? Why did they choose soft ground for a heavy marble tower? More questions appear. Why didn't they choose another location? Why didn't they reinforce the soil? Why did they rush the project? The tower leaned. People panicked, but someone said, maybe it should stay like this. That sentence changed history. A final question. Is a mistake always a mistake? Today, millions of people travel to Pisa just to see it. Why? Just because it is leaning? Or because of the story behind it? Or maybe because people who feel imperfect see hope in it? Because the Leaning Tower of Pisa is not only architecture, it whispers something to us. Perfection is not always straight. Leaning does not always mean falling. And this is where the story truly begins. In the rest of this video, you will discover who built the tower, why it began to lean, how many times it was saved from collapse, why it is considered safe today, and most importantly, what it teaches us. Let's dive into the story of the world's most famous lean. The film begins. The story of the Leaning Tower of Pisa does not begin with leaning. It begins with pride. In the 12th century, Pisa was not just a quiet Italian town. It was a powerful maritime republic. Rich, ambitious, victorious in trade and war. The leaders of the city wanted a symbol, something that would say to the world, Pisa is powerful. Pisa is blessed. Pisa will be remembered. So they planned a grand religious complex, a cathedral, a baptistery, a cemetery, and a magnificent bell tower. That bell tower would later become the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Laying the first stones, 1173 construction began in 1173. White marble arrived from nearby quarries. Massive blocks were lifted into place with wooden cranes and rope systems. Medieval workers covered in dust and sweat, chipped stone by hand. The plan was simple: an elegant cylindrical tower, 8 stories tall, crowned with bells that would ring across the city. Everything seemed normal, at first, but there was a problem nobody took seriously enough. Beneath the tower was soft soil, a mix of sand, clay, and water-soaked silt, the remains of an ancient river delta. The foundation was only about 3 meters deep. For a structure weighing thousands of tons, that was dangerously shallow. Still, construction continued. The first lean appears. By the time the builders reached the third floor, something strange happened. The tower tilted. Not much, just a few centimeters at first, but enough that the workers could see it with the naked eye. Imagine the silence on the construction site. Hammers stopped. Voices fell quiet. The questions began. Did we calculate wrong? Is the soil sinking? Will the tower collapse? Some argued to tear it down and start again. Others insisted they continue. The money was spent. The prestige was at stake. They chose to continue. That decision changed architectural history. Trying to fix the mistake while building, the builders tried to correct the lean while constructing. They added extra stone to one side. They built the next floor slightly taller on the short side. If you look closely today, the tower isn't just leaning, it is slightly curved like a banana. That curve is proof of medieval engineers fighting a problem they barely understood. War saves the tower. Then something unexpected happened. War broke out. Money ran out. Construction stopped. The half-finished tower stood for almost a century, leaning, waiting. And that pause, the same pause caused by disaster, actually saved the tower. During those long years, the soil slowly compressed. The ground settled. The tilt stabilized. Had they finished the tower quickly, it probably would have collapsed in the Middle Ages, a lesson hidden in stone. This was not just construction, it was an experiment, an accident, a miracle balance between physics and patience. The tower leaned because the ground was weak. It survived because time was long. It became famous because people refused to give up. What began as a mistake became one of the most recognizable structures in the world, and the story of its construction reminds us. Sometimes history is not designed. Sometimes it simply tilts into existence. The construction stopped. Suddenly, without celebration, without explanation carved in stone. Why? Because history intervened. Wars broke out across Italy. Money that once flowed into marble and scaffolding was now needed for soldiers and defenses. Pisa, once confident and wealthy, had to choose survival over symbols. And so the tower was left unfinished, a half-built structure of white marble, leaning slightly, standing in silence. Years passed, then decades. Nearly 100 years went by. During this long pause, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath the tower began to settle. The soft layers of clay and sand slowly compressed under the tower's weight. The leaning did not disappear, but it stopped getting worse. Time did what medieval engineering could not. It stabilized the tower. Ironically, the very interruption caused by war and poverty became the tower's greatest protection. Had the builders continued immediately, had they rushed to finish all 8 levels without pause, the ground would not have had time to adjust. The pressure would have increased too fast, and the tower, heavy and unbalanced, would likely have collapsed during the Middle Ages. But history hesitated, and that hesitation saved the Leaning Tower of Pisa. When construction finally resumed generations later, the builders returned not with confidence, but with caution. They could see the lean clearly now. They understood that something had gone wrong. So they made a strange decision. Instead of correcting the lean completely, they tried to work with it. Upper floors were built slightly taller on one side than the other. Stone by stone, they attempted to counterbalance the tilt. This is why the tower is not simply leaning, it is subtly curved, a visible record of centuries of struggle between gravity and human ambition. By the time the tower was finally completed in the 14th century, it was already famous. Not for its bells, but for its defiance. It leaned, and yet it stood. What began as a failure became a lesson. Sometimes stopping is more important than continuing. Sometimes delay is not weakness, but wisdom. The Leaning Tower of Pisa survived not because it was perfect, but because history gave it time. When construction finally resumed, the builders were no longer blind to the problem. The lean was obvious now, impossible to ignore, written into the stone itself. The question was no longer whether the tower was leaning, but what to do about it. Demolishing it was unthinkable. Starting again would mean admitting failure. So the architects chose a third path, a risky one. They said in effect, if it leans, then we will build against the lean. Instead of correcting the foundation, They decided to compensate above it. As construction climbed higher, the upper floors were built slightly taller on one side, the side opposite the lean. Each new level subtly pushed the center of mass back toward balance. It was not a dramatic correction. It was delicate, incremental, almost invisible. Stone by stone, they tried to outsmart gravity. This is why the Leaning Tower of Pisa is not simply tilted. It is curved. If you study it closely, you'll notice something strange. The bottom of the tower leans one way, while the top gently bends back in the opposite direction, like a frozen motion, like a struggle captured in marble. Some describe it as looking like a banana, others call it a bow under tension. But in reality, it is a record of human adaptation. The builders did not defeat gravity, they negotiated with it. They accepted the flaw and worked around it. This decision was bold, almost reckless. Medieval engineers had no modern calculations, no computers, no simulations, only experience, intuition, and courage. And yet, it worked, not perfectly, not permanently, but well enough to allow the tower to rise to completion. The famous silhouette of Pisa, the one recognized around the world, was not planned from the beginning. It was created by compromise, by accepting imperfection instead of denying it. This was not just architecture, it was philosophy in stone. Sometimes the solution is not to force things straight, but to bend intelligently. And that bending is what made the Leaning Tower unforgettable. This is the question everyone asks, for centuries, for millions of visitors, for every engineer who ever looked at it. Why didn't the Leaning Tower of Pisa fall? It leans, it should collapse. And yet, it doesn't. The answer is not a miracle. It is a combination of unexpected cooperation between the tower, the ground beneath it, and the laws of physics. Soft ground. The first surprise. The soil beneath the tower is soft. Clay, sand, and water-rich layers. At first glance, this sounds like a weakness, and in many cases, it would be. But here, softness became an advantage. Instead of cracking or snapping under pressure, the ground gave way slowly. It absorbed movement. It allowed the tower to settle gradually instead of collapsing suddenly. The ground did not fight the tower. It moved with it. Elastic structure, stone that bends. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is made of marble, a material we often think of as rigid and unforgiving. But the way the tower was built made it surprisingly elastic. Its walls are thick. Its structure is symmetrical. Its circular shape allows forces to spread evenly. When external forces, wind, vibration, or earthquakes, acted on the tower, the energy did not concentrate in one fragile point. It traveled through the structure. The tower did not resist movement, it adapted. Ring-shaped design, balance in stone. The tower's circular, ring-like design plays a critical role. Unlike square or angular buildings, a circular structure distributes weight evenly around its center. This meant that even as the tower leaned, its mass remained relatively balanced. No single wall carried all the stress. No corner became a breaking point. Instead, the entire structure shared the burden. Earthquakes. The ultimate test. Italy is no stranger to earthquakes. Over the centuries, the Leaning Tower of Pisa has experienced multiple seismic events, and yet it survived them all. Why? Because of a phenomenon engineers later called soil-structure interaction. When the ground shook, the soft soil moved first. The tower followed. It swayed gently, not violently. Like two dancers moving together, the tower and the earth stayed in rhythm. This prevented destructive resonance, the kind that brings buildings down. In simple terms, the tower didn't fight the earthquake. It danced with it. Wind and storms. Slow, not sudden. Strong winds and storms also tested the tower, but again its mass and flexibility worked in its favor. The tower is heavy, but not stiff. Tall, but not thin. Wind pressure spreads across its curved surface instead of hitting it like a wall. Movement happens slowly, and slow movement is survivable. The final truth. The Leaning Tower of Pisa survived not because it was perfectly designed. It survived because its flaws were forgiving, not brittle. Soft ground instead of hard rock, elastic structure instead of rigid resistance, circular balance instead of sharp angles. It did not stand still. It moved intelligently, and that movement saved it. The tower reminds us of something powerful. Sometimes strength is not about standing firm. Sometimes it's about knowing how to bend without breaking. By the end of the 20th century, the Leaning Tower of Pisa was no longer just a curiosity. It was a warning. Engineers, historians, and scientists had been measuring the tower for decades, tracking every millimeter of movement. And in the early 1990s, their conclusion was clear and alarming. The tower is dangerous. If it leans any further, it will collapse. At that point, the tilt had reached nearly 5.5 degrees. The center of gravity was shifting too far. The margin for error was shrinking. For the first time in its long history, the Leaning Tower of Pisa was officially closed to the public. The question was no longer academic. It was urgent. How do you save a global monument without destroying what makes it unique? A risky mission begins. The rescue operation that followed was unlike anything attempted before. The goal was not to straighten the tower completely. Doing so would damage its structure and erase centuries of history. Instead, engineers aimed for something more delicate. Reduce the tilt, just enough to make it safe. First came stabilization. Steel cables were wrapped around the tower and anchored deep into the ground. These cables acted like invisible hands holding the tower in place while work began below. Then came the most daring step. Removing the earth itself, engineers decided to do something that sounded almost impossible. They removed soil from beneath the higher side of the tower, tiny amounts at a time, not digging aggressively, but carefully extracting small volumes of earth, allowing the tower to settle back by itself. This process is known as controlled soil extraction. It required extreme precision. Remove too much, and the tower could shift suddenly. Remove too little, and nothing would change. So the process was slow, measured in millimeters, watched day and night by sensors. As soil was removed, gravity did the rest. The tower began to lean back. Not dramatically, not visibly to the naked eye, but enough, reducing the danger. Over several years, the angle of the tower was reduced by about 40 centimeters at the top. That might sound small, but in engineering terms, it was enormous. The center of gravity moved back into a safer zone. Stress on the foundation decreased. The risk of collapse dropped significantly. All of this happened without dismantling the tower, without rebuilding it, without changing its iconic silhouette. The Leaning Tower was saved by letting physics work gently instead of violently. A monument declared safe in 2001 after more than a decade of work, the tower was reopened to the public. Experts announced that it was now stable for at least 200 to 300 years, provided conditions remain similar. For the first time in centuries, the Leaning Tower of Pisa was officially considered safe. Not straight, not perfect, but secure. The lesson of modern science. The modern rescue of the Leaning Tower teaches us something profound. Not every problem needs to be fixed completely. Some only need to be understood. Instead of forcing the tower upright, engineers respected its history. Instead of fighting gravity, they guided it. The Leaning Tower of Pisa survived the Middle Ages by accident. It survived the modern world by intelligence, and today it still stands. Leaning, imperfect, and alive. Not because humans conquered nature, but because they finally learned how to work with it.